People that work in the wedding industry, have you ever seen a couple and immediately thought this ends in divorce? Why? Now let's read some comments. I'm a therapist and marriage counseling a lot of times is unfortunately divorce counseling. If your spouse talks about it, go. People wait way too long. When my husband and I got married, we both agreed that no one gets a veto card on couples therapy. If one of us felt it was needed, we would go. Neither of us has asked yet, but it's nice to know that we have that fallback if we need it. 26 years. You never know. I feel like anyone that wants to get engaged should immediately get in front of a couples counselor. There is just so much baggage and inability to communicate that people bring into relationships. Photographing the groom and you see his eyes light up when a guest arrives. You look over and it's a cute woman in a short dress. He smiles, walks up to the woman, picks her up, and swings her in his arms. Best smile I captured of the groom all day. Marriage didn't last 6 months from what I've heard. Whoa, that's really sad. That sounds like one we went to. The groom was walking around holding hands with a woman who wasn't his wife. A year or so later he left his wife for her. I have a friend who is a wedding photographer, a rather busy and expensive one at that, so people usually book a year in advance. So she had a bride book the wedding date and pay the deposit. Nothing unusual there. The bride confirmed the venue, also booked and pricey, and had the general discussions with her about the style that she wanted, etc. They had regular meetings over the following months, but the groom was never there. A bit unusual, but not unheard of. So it's now 4 weeks before the wedding and they have the meeting to lock down all the details, but still no groom. My friend asks about him and the bride mentions for the first time that she isn't engaged. Okay, maybe she has a long-term boyfriend and is planning a surprise wedding. No, it turns out that she doesn't have a boyfriend or any guy in mind. But she prayed about it and God told her to trust that he will provide a groom for her. So, in the end, no groom magically materialized, and there was no wedding. So in that case, the marriage lasted 0 minutes and we were all sure that it wasn't going to work out. In fact, at the time we had some running jokes about her meeting a guy on a date and asking him if he wants to go to a wedding with her next weekend. I don't work in the industry, just have my own personal story. My boyfriend and I got invited to his female coworker's wedding. We used to go dancing with her while she was engaged. Her boyfriend was stationed on the East Coast. Her fiancé didn't take kindly to a male coworker showing up to the wedding that we were invited to, and I even went to her bridal shower, so the groom sent his dad to threaten my boyfriend into leaving because they work in the same industry. That is, I have connections you'll never work in again. Even though he was retired. Groom also refused to dance with the bride except for photos, and she loved to line dance, so she was crushed. All of us who cared about the bride knew her groom was just a shoto guy. They lasted a year. I've been right a few times for sure. Photographer here. One groom was so full of himself, but did that whatever you want, my queen thing, where he wants to be seen as this great guy, but really he's a self-absorbed duck. He was a chef, and ducking loved telling people that it was a quick engagement and marriage, and I got the feeling maybe too quick. The wedding and reception were to be at his parents' place, and his mom had a lot of input, as did his sister. The bride got shut down whenever she talked. On the day of the wedding, I arrived to shoot the bride getting ready. She is alone with the hair and makeup person. I initially thought that person was a friend, but she wasn't. Her bridesmaids were not there. 2 hours go by. She can't get a hold of them. The makeup person leaves. I help her put her veil on and do up her shoes. I'm feeling so bad for her and also awkward as duck. This is supposed to be her big day and here is basically a stranger putting her veil on and telling her she looks great. Finally, the bridesmaids come in. The maid of honor is the groom's sister. When the bride questions them, the sister says they went out for breakfast. The bride asks why they wouldn't tell her or bring her food and they get posse, like she's being Bridezilla. Then it comes out that the groom was invited for breakfast along with the groomsmen, and they all had started drinking. It's only 11:30 am and the bridal party is half lit. The kicker? None of the bridesmaids are dressed or have their hair or makeup done. The wedding is in 30 minutes. I get 0 photos of the bridesmaids. I run to shoot the groomsmen. They are doing shots. I get some great photos of them because they are drunk and all dressed up and feeling great. Wedding happens and that part is fine. We are supposed to go to a nearby beach and trail for photos. This never happens because the groom is literally talking to every person in attendance in the longest receiving line situation I have ever seen. He keeps drinking. The meal happens and takes forever. The sun is about to set. I tell the couple I literally have 0 photos of them alone together and we need to go. He says yeah after the speeches. He gets up to speak after several of his friends and his sister do 10-minute speeches and he goes on and on and on. Most of it has nothing to do with his new bride. 30 minutes into his speech and the sun has set. He finally finishes and I approach the bride. She just looks at me, defeated, and says, "You can just go home now." Groom was in the middle of a group of people, chugging a beer and laughing loudly, while his beautiful new bride sat alone, seemingly wondering what the duck she got herself into. I delivered the images and they didn't pay the remainder amount. I got a million excuses. After a month, I finally texted him and said I was going through small claims. The next day he sent an F with an angry message about hounding him and giving me a bad review. I saw her 6 months later at a restaurant, and before I could ask, she told me she left him. Saw him a few months ago working at a liquor store downtown. I guess being a chef didn't work out. A friend told me they know of him, and he got fired from 3 restaurants. He ignored me while he flirted hard with this woman. I shit you not, just before we left he said to her, "I'm off in 5 minutes. I'll walk with you to that store. I'll tell Charlie to put that delicious cab sauve aside for you." So smooth. Good luck, lady. Lol, I find it funny chef title is given so easily in restaurants. I have worked as cook for so many years. I never thought I was chef. I'm a cook. Lol, chef would be someone making good money and higher position. Lol, feel sorry for the lady. Was at a friend's wedding once. It was at the Justice of the Peace when the judge or officiant came around to, if anyone doesn't believe in the union, to speak up or forever hold your peace. A loud "oh" came shrieking from the back. It was my friend's 2-year-old son. Everybody was joking, saying it was a sign. Less than a year later the couple got divorced. He has the site. This was its first manifestation. That's interesting. When my brother and his wife got married last summer, I did not see my 6-month-old niece cry once the entire time. Cue to the very small, relatively quiet and calm COVID-friendly outdoor ceremony, she starts absolutely shrieking. I remember sitting there mentally taking it as a sign in silence. Lol. They are now in the process of separating. When the bride and groom argued over why the groom's mother shouldn't get all money given to them on their wedding day, yeah, that was a red flag. Haha, my ex tried to convince me to let his mum take the money that night and we'd collect it the next afternoon when we got back from our hotel stay. Fat chance I'd let the extreme gamblers hold on to that much cash. One of my close friends asked everyone to give cash or gift cards instead of presents because they already had a house with everything they needed. At the reception, her dad stands up for his speech and offers the gifted money to the Buddhist temple where their family went. My friend was mortified. Her husband got super angry, but it was done. There must have been 200+ people at that wedding. That temple got a huge donation. They had a big fight the night before the wedding and were considering calling it off. Until the bride showed up 30 minutes before the ceremony, no one was sure if she would be there at all. The groom danced with his mom more times than he did with the bride. The bride was snippy and nitpicky with the staff all night. The word annulment was cast around, and I hope to God they went through with it the next day because holy shot. Did they sign the papers at the ceremony? Usually those don't get filed until at least the next day. A few times as a photographer. The couple were usually fine. The families themselves were too different and combative. This is why my husband and I eloped. We keep our families as separate as possible. His side isn't bad and my paternal aunts and uncles are cool, so they would probably be fine. But having my immediate family interact with his immediate family just makes me cringe. Think hardcore Republican vs suburban Democrats. Oh my god, yes. My and my fiance would be married by now if the idea of our families actually meeting wasn't absolutely horrifying. I don't work in the wedding industry, but I have a depressing wedding story. I have a friend who I grew up with. She was always gorgeous and incredibly popular with guys, and I always thought she was a great person. As I got older, I came to realize she was actually extremely toxic in relationships and did better when she was single. She had been seeing a new guy for 2 months when one day I receive a wedding invitation in the mail. Knowing her history, it was a massive red flag for me. I turn up to the wedding and it's at a gorgeous little backyard type wedding. It's spring and everything looks perfect. I greet her family and it's like I've turned up to a funeral, not a wedding. They're all extremely solemn, and when I ask about the groom, her mother rolls her eyes and says this: "It's a mistake." Wedding commences, and as the bride comes down the aisle, her face is grey and like she would rather be anywhere else. They exchange vows while the bride does everything in her power to not touch her husband-to-be, even standing a solid meter away from him as they stand at the front. She actually cringes and looks away when he gets choked up saying how much he loves her. When the priest announces the kiss, the bride takes a slow step forward and presents her cheek for him to kiss instead of her lips. No one cheers. It's just an awkward shuffling of feet and a few scattered claps. It was the worst wedding I've ever been to. They lasted about 3 months before separating. Heard from a friend who did calligraphy that a bride came to get wedding invites, and the usual wording of bride mum and dad and groom mum and dad invite you to the wedding of bride and groom. Bride didn't want groom's parents' names on the invite. My mate did an invite mock-up, called the couple for a check, and the groom lost it because groom's parents were the ones paying for most of the wedding. They didn't need any invites. LMAO. This reminds me of my husband's first wedding. No one informed him of much of anything because he was finishing his final year of school. So the wedding rolls up and there's no mention of his parents anywhere. Not on the invites, not on the program, nothing. Reception rolls around and his new in-laws have their own sweetheart table while his parents are seated with a few of his friends from school. His parents paid for the whole thing as their gift, while her parents paid for the honeymoon. Wedding was like $50k. The honeymoon was a $2k all inclusive somewhere in the Caribbean. They lasted less than 2 years. I work in a hotel. I came in one night to find the wedding was already wrapped up. It was supposed to go until 1 AM and it was 11 PM because the wedding couple had a fight and she went home with mom. At another one they had a huge rehearsal in a fight which spilled out into the lobby. Everyone in the lobby found out that she hated his parents. She was pregnant and she had no idea who the father was, and a few other things. Half the guest list packed up and checked out the next day. They still got married. Not actually in the industry, but I have helped out a friend with a few weddings. 2 of the weddings I could just tell they weren't going to make it. The first wedding, the bride and groom hardly talked the entire wedding. It was like they had nothing in common. And then later the groom pretty much ducks off halfway through and went home because, I quote, he was tired. So he just left his bride having to take pictures with the wedding guests on her own. He never came back that evening, so she had to greet everyone off, etc. Funny enough, about a year later I heard they're filing for divorce. Another time was actually last summer. Just before the wedding speeches, the groom went go hang out with his friends for like half an hour, leaving the bride sitting there alone and delaying the speeches. Then right after the bride and groom cut the cake, he once again went to go hang out with his friends and abandoned his wife. So she was left alone having to mingle with all the guests, and he made no interaction with her side of the guests. He stuck with his friends the rest of the evening. His wife basically had to go and beg him to come and take more wedding pictures. At one point in the evening he actually went for a drive with his friends for about an hour and his wife had no idea where he was. I mean, I get wanting to mingle with your friends at your wedding, but to not even mingle with your wife's family or friends on your wedding day seems quite rude. Wedding DJ here. Had a wedding a few years ago where the groom was a total duckhead. When it was his turn to make a speech, he refused to make one. When the bride's sister begged him to please make a speech or at least just tell the bride she looks beautiful, he got up, took the mic, mumbled to her that she looks beautiful, and sat back down. When I left after the wedding was done, I was walking to my van with some gear and I saw the bride sitting one side crying. Found out a few days later that the groom hit her 3 days before the wedding and he tried to hit her at the wedding again when she asked him to not drink so much and pace himself. Many years ago I had a side hustle doing cakes and would often get orders for wedding cakes. Long story short, the bride-to-be threw a full-fledged stumpy-footed tantrum, locking herself in my bathroom, and refused to come out because the groom was unreasonably insisting on having a say in what the cake flavor was going to be. Like, I'd say through the door, "Get out of my bathroom," and all I'd get was a whinny defiant little no. I think she was about 22. Holy shit, that's embarrassing. Did you end up making a cake for them in the end, or did you tell them to screw off? Was there even a wedding to make a cake for at all after that? When my husband and I got married, the cake was the only thing he really had a request about. Pumpkin with cream cheese frosting. We got married right before Thanksgiving. It was the best cake I've ever had. I worked fine dining / catering for over 20 years, so I've worked lots of weddings and receptions. I once heard a bride at the reception during the toasts say that she actually thought she was asking out the groom's twin brother on their first date, and that might actually be cute, except she just kept going on how the twin was more compatible, etc. Then she ended the toast with, "Well, as nice as you are, you'll make a great first husband." I was walking past the cameraman at that time, and you can hear me on tape saying, "Did you get that? Tell me you got that." Used to serve at a lot of weddings. At one very expensive engagement party, the groom got drunk and tried to pick a fight with one of the servers. He then punched another guest and had to be walked out. Bride seemed upset but not shocked. I perform ceremonies as an officiant and no other officiants. The worst, IMHO, are the weddings that are just a bad idea. The couple is young, inexperienced, and selfish. I mean, even courthouse weddings can last decades, but if you have a wedding that is clearly not planned out, they are often not thought out as well. Weddings that are rebellious as a duck you daddy, I'm 19 and marry who I want. I give about 2 years, especially if the bride and groom are out of sync with one another, or one just looks like this was the other's idea primarily. Oddly enough, weddings with cheesy themes, Star Wars, Elvis, etc. last longer than the traditional styles. I have theories on that, but don't have enough data that's not anecdotal to back it up. But I think casual weddings, where everyone is relaxed, happy, and having a good time, because the wedding is about celebrating, rather than ceremony, will last the longest. A sense of humor helps. If both the bride and groom are relaxed and silly with one another, those last the longest. Not sure if this belongs here, since I'm really sure that they got divorced after, but anyway, I was helping out at my parents' restaurant, where a huge wedding party was hosted. I was busy serving drinks and suddenly loud yelling and screaming started right behind me. Turns out the bride had somehow found out that the groom had hooked up with her sister right before the wedding ceremony, and apparently on a few occasions before, and in her anger she stabbed him in the chest with a dinner fork several times. We had to call an ambulance and the police. It was like hell. Edit. I didn't expected this story to blow up that much, but since a bunch of people asked, I just called my mom and asked about this story, and apparently the former bride's parents are still regular guests at my parents' restaurant. Not for weddings though, and according to my mother they told that the groom and the bride's sister now actually have 2 children together and are planning on getting married, but had to cancel their wedding multiple times due COVID-19. Edit second, since a bunch of people asked, no, I don't know what happened to the bride or how she and her family get along now, and neither does my mom. I don't think she went to jail for this though. She probably got sentenced to a fine or probation. This story takes place in Germany. She probably got sentenced in accordance with section 224 IS to St. GB dangerous bodily harm. I'm a photographer and I've shot 3 weddings BC. I hate them, and they are not for me. Bless you guys who do it, but it's too much work and drama for me, and not worth the money. Anyway, one of the weddings, the groom called the bride unattractive. She was stunning and used to model, was maybe a size 2, and he was cute, but generic cute. He kept taking shots of vodka with his boys and asked for a full-on photo shoot with his mom. He was definitely a mama's boy. BC mom was hovering, but you know it's bad when mom suggests that he maybe take some photos with his wife. He told me to stfu every time I redirected, so after the 3rd time that happened, and he flashed me his junk, I started packing up. When he started yelling at me, I just told him no one talks to me like that and I'd send them a refund. I knew right then that it wouldn't last. He started crying and said he'd behave. He did, but it didn't matter. BC 2 weeks later the marriage was annulled. No one wanted the photos. I was paid in full for photos no one wanted. Bride's dad had paid me and tipped me well too. When I offered to refund him half anyway, he said the bride knew. When the groom yelled at me and cried that it wasn't going to work, so I earned it. I guess the whole fam was trying to get them to call it off. Was working at a hotel during a wedding weekend and the father of the bride and the groom were caught masturbating one another by one of the staff 2 days before the wedding. We all had a bit of a giggle and assumed this was some sort of misunderstanding. There were weird ideas thrown around like maybe there is a family tradition where they hold each other's ducks while they kiss or some shot like that. Anyway, the Baron all still in good spirits and the wedding goes ahead. At 7:57 PM on the night of the wedding I brought the bottle of champagne up to the room along with some other things we did for a wedding night. Normally before they check in, but they were already staying in that room before they got married. I was told there is nobody in the room and the groom is downstairs and the bride is supposed to be out getting photos or something. I knock, we had to even ken we knew somebody was in there, then quickly opened the door and walked straight in. The bride is bent over the chair with her wedding dress over her head and the best man is pounding her from behind. I just left the champagne on the ground and left. One seriously ducked up family, but they all tipped well. Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more videos. Also like the video if you enjoy it.